Hello, my comrade. Today is the 34th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square protest. Before you get confused, I will explain why NASPO is talking about this. While most seems to see this as a liberal protest, the reality is that this is actually a protest against Deng's revisionist policy and his embracing of liberalism, and it is important to look at how we could approach this from the National Bolshevik point of view.
And in China, young people took to the streets to call for reform, but were met with a force beyond imagination.
For most that know about this incident, you either hear the CNN narrative where liberal students who were tired of the one-party rule of the Communist Party demanding economic and social change, making demands such as freedom of speech and a one-party rule and an acceleration of privatization. But then the evil communist tanky government sent in the tank and massacred all the protesters. Or that you might hear the Chinese official narrative that China will have collapsed and be poor if the demands are fulfilled, and the incident is a necessary evil to continue Deng's economic reform. However, all these narratives are only true to an extent. Today we will discuss the Tiananmen Square incident through a national Bolshevik lens. While officially, the reason of protest came from the mourning of the liberal reformer Hu Yaobang, the social change brought by Deng Xiaoping's reform is what caused mass dissatisfaction towards the government. While his liberalization policy allows some people to get rich in China, many are on the short end of the stick. For example, his plan to make the price of goods based on the market in 1988 led to panic cash withdrawal and panic buying. The department stores are emptied. Although this decision was reversed in 2 weeks, it had a permanent effect on the Chinese economy. It created an inflation rate of 28% that year, and with this inflation and cost of living crisis, the students, urban residents, and the government workers are worried about losing their lifestyle and job security. The old guard who supported the initial revolution feels a sense of betrayal. Meanwhile, the lucky few entrepreneurs who managed to get rich are flaunting their wealth in front of the struggling people. So although these protesters seem to be demanding more liberalism, the reality is that this is a backlash against liberalism. The only reason this is a liberal protest is because in the 1980s, the neoliberal climate forced them to kill the socialism with liberalism for it to have any appeal to the international community. But then some National Bolshevik could say, well, China is pretty close to National Bolshevism. China would have just been Bolshevik and not National Bolshevik without his reform. First of all, China did not become National Bolshevik through Deng's economic reform. Despite making some economic compromise due to the protest, his reform still resulted in China becoming a quasi-liberal state for the next 3 decades. It wasn't until Xi Jinping's rule that China started to head towards a more National Bolshevik direction. While the liberal capitalists like to argue partial implementation of neoliberal economics and globalization lead to greater economic growth, the Gravel Institute identified the careful construction of a mixed economy was actually the real key of success. Moreover, by looking at the growth rate of the Chinese economy, the National Bolsheviks' policy of Xi still managed to grow the economy at a similar pace. Even then, the use of liberalism to achieve massive growth is not without a cost. One of the main critiques of capitalism by National Bolshevism is that capitalism incentivizes capitalists to maximize profit, which is best done through expanding business globally. This pressured the government to implement globalism and push for more liberal policy. After the reform, not only inequality has become a significant problem in the country, but most importantly, the Chinese economy is so integrated into the world economy that it will be unthinkable for China to ever be economically independent from countries like, let's say, the US, essentially giving the American hegemony power to sway its international policy and comply with the sanction regime, preventing China from getting fully committed to multipolarity. Although the Tiananmen Square protests were later hijacked by the liberals, these people were originally protesting for a very legitimate cause. Ultimately, it was Deng's fault for his reckless embrace of liberalism that caused this incident. At this point, most Chinese know about the Tiananmen Square protest despite the censorship, but most of them only hear about it from the liberal perspective. This causes the opposition of China to develop the will based on liberalism. Overall, it is far better to acknowledge the incident, debunk this liberal narrative, and acknowledge that Deng is wrong. If you like this video, please subscribe, like, and comment. I have also set up an official Discord server for this channel. Join now to have a chance of becoming a party member.